Hi everyone, today I have got some top tips for you regarding die cutting. These tips are going to take your die cutting from okay, a laborious task, to absolutely enjoying the process and the results. So these are old clips that I filmed for CraftStash a while ago. I've put them together in a compilation for you, and there's everything here from the cutting material you're using to the position of your dies, and there's a fantastic tip at the end with what to do with your die waste too. Let me know in the comments what you think of these, and if you've got your own die cutting tips, let everybody else know as well.
So the first one is the right sort of weight and texture of cardstock for die cutting, because so many people, you actually believe that thinner paper is better to die cut through rather than a thicker cardstock, and this is not always the case. Now, the thinner paper is usually smoother, you'll find, a lot of papers, and you may think, well, it's thinner, so it's going to cut through easier. Of course it is. Well, it's not, because the fibres are compacted more tightly within this to make it a smooth paper. Okay, I've got a vellum here, a parchment, just as an example, but this goes for many papers. So if you were to just try and cut copy paper, for example, sometimes even dies won't cut through that, whereas they will go through a decent cardstock. So I'm just going to show you with this one. I'm just going to die cut this thin paper here. Let's just pop this on here and just run this through. Now, this is a die that has come from a magazine. It's one of the dies that came in a recent magazine, actually, and if I just show you there, you'll see it's a very thin paper, and yet it still hasn't cut. I have to really pull that away from the edges there, so that's not a good cut at all. Let's then run that same die through with a piece of cardstock instead. So just popping that into the machine. Now, this cardstock has a slight texture to it. The colours are irrelevant, but the texture is important because of the thicker texture, the woven sort of texture that it has on this cardstock. This actually means that it's got got looser fibres within it. And this is, yeah, there we go, that's cut absolutely beautifully, and all those pieces are falling out, as you can see. Now, this is, of course, a much thicker cardstock than the vellum that we were just cutting into. Now, that is something that so many people make. They message me and they say, I've got this die, I can't get it to cut. I've even tried paper and it won't cut through. And I'm like, don't try paper, it will not work. Find something, even watercolour card, watercolour paper, because of the softness of it, because of the texture, it's got very loose fibres. Hopefully your dies, even your intricate ones that are a little bit of a pain sometimes, even they should go through the softer cardstocks. Mistake number 2 is particularly if you cut into foam. Lots of people have learned that if you cut into foam with your dies, you can create your own stamps. This is very true, but cutting into foam can be a bit problematic sometimes. You may find, and I've got an example here for you, if you run your foam through and back again, so many of us now, we do run our foam, or our dies rather, whether it's with paper, foam, whatever, forwards and backwards through to get a better cut. What you'll find is you get something called a double cut. Now, I don't know how well you can see this. Let's have a look around the edges here. This is a really good example of a double cut. You'll see these little edges that you get everywhere. Basically, the die has gone through, it's then lifted up, and it's cut again a second time, but in a slightly different position. All these wispy bits around the edge, that's all a double cut. That means you don't get a clean, clear image. You just get lots of little bits everywhere. The detail in your image will be gone, and it will basically be a ruined die cut. Okay, so you can't use that for stamping very easily at all. So let me just show you with foam in particular, and this goes for any material that won't stick into the die. You only want to run it through the once. With foam, trust me, it will cut first time. It cuts beautifully every time. You never need to run this back through. Even if you tape this down onto your foam, it will still move if you run it through and then back again. You only ever want to do it once. So popping this in, and this is because the die has, all dies have this sort of non-stick coating on them as standard, and with paper and card we still find they do stick into the die a little bit, which is great, and it just means that if you run it back again, it doesn't tend to move. Whereas with something like foam, that isn't going to stick into your die anyway because of the thickness of it. Look, it won't sit in your die. You'll very rarely get many foam pieces stuck in the die when you release this. And then, of course, if you're running this through, as you get to the other end, what will happen is the foam will lift out ever so slightly, and then you start running your die back through again, and then, of course, your die then lays back down. I can't get that the right way around. There we go. So you'll go through, it will lift slightly, the foam will move, you'll start running back through, it will go back down, it will double cut. But if you just cut it the once, so I guarantee you that will cut beautifully anyway, and you have those nice clear edges, none of these little pieces that are going to be need you to start getting your tweezers out and pulling things around and getting frustrated because it's not a neat finish. Absolutely perfect. I'm just going around the detail here to show you a perfect clear line there every time. So with foam or any other material you might be cutting that doesn't stay within the die, so think, for example, things like cork sheets, leatherette, if you cut anything like that with your dies, only ever run them through once and remove them. Don't try to attempt to run it through back through again. So let's talk about die positioning. Now I've got 3 tips here for you. The first one is the direction that we're laying our dies. Now what you may have noticed I tend to do is put my die down, then my paper on top, and then my cutting plate on top of that. This just means that a lot more pressure is getting to the top of the die here through the cardstock quicker than if I was to have my die this way down, because this is the way that we're often shown as beginners to die cut. But I've learned that actually 9 times out of 10, if I've got a die on here facing upwards, paper on top, it will cut beautifully. Now in addition to that, the way you position your die on the plate is also very important. If you've got a larger format machine, you'll find always that there's more pressure at the edges. Even these electronic machines that claim to have even pressure, certainly after a while the edges are where that pressure is going to be. It just naturally happens. With a smaller format machine like this one, you don't need to worry about that. You've got good pressure all over because there's not that much difference from here to here anyway. Now also, if you've got a large die and you're putting it through, I'd say sideways, so parallel to the rollers that are inside here, you're not going to get as good a cut. Whereas if you are to put this in, well, I'd say vertically, so adjacent to the rollers, or even diagonally. Diagonally is best. What you want to do is imagine as your roller comes down, you want to stretch, you want to elongate that shape as much as possible. Really, so as little of the die at a time is running through your roller. Okay, so for the same reason, when we're stacking our dies in our machine, you may think, well, I'm going to save time here, I'm going to cut lots of them at once, and you start placing them on like this without thinking about it. There we go, I'm going to run those through. Now as the roller comes over your plate, once it gets to here and coming over here, it's got to spread its pressure across all of this at the same time. There's going to be areas missed, unfortunately. If you were to firstly elongate any large dies, but also then do the same with your other dies, spread your dies around so that as the roller comes over, it's only got a small amount of each of the dies to pass through at a time. Okay, so let's just test that out. So I've got lots of dies here, I've got them upside down, and I've stretched this one. I should, with any luck, it doesn't matter whereabouts these are, as long as they are one after the other, I should with any luck get a really good cut on all of these. And because this is cardstock, not foam or any material that won't stay in my die, I can run this back through quite happily as well. And don't forget, we've got those dies facing upwards with the paper on top, not the other way around. There we go already. There's my butterfly. So I can see my 3 pieces down here have cut. My butterfly has cut, and all the detail in there has cut nicely as well, just popping some of that out with my fingers. So absolutely perfect, really happy with that. And I've got my speedy crafting on. I don't have to worry about going back and trying to recut anything. The next quick tip for you is not considering how you're going to glue down that die cut, particularly if it's something like this, which is particularly intricate, got all of this detail. Definitely think ahead to whether you want to add something like the Sizzix adhesive sheets or the CraftStash adhesive foam to your project, and do that before you die cut. That way you're cutting through the cardstock or the paper and the adhesive on the back at the same time. Everything's lined up for you, and it's just going to make your crafting so much easier. So on here I've already applied an adhesive sheet, and then once I've die cut this, all I need to do is peel back and I've got myself a sticky die cut. And of course I won't be wasting what's left either, because that will all have sticky on it. So make sure you just consider that before you run through a die cut. How are you going to be sticking that down afterwards? My very last tip, and something that many of us are guilty of, is as soon as we've die cut, as we did here, is throwing this away. You've got yourself some beautiful silhouettes there that you can be using within your die cuts. So let me just show you. So this is that piece of waste that we already had. I'm just going to pop this onto here. I can use a little bit of tape just to hold that down. So when I remove my silhouette, get rid of any little bits of paper there. Firstly, I've got a lovely silhouette anyway, I could just use that on its own. When I place my die cut over the top, that is beautifully coloured in underneath, all just with using that wasted piece of cardstock that we'd have probably otherwise thrown in the bin.
So I hope this has helped some of you with your die cutting technique, and don't forget to check out this video as well for your ultimate die cutting hack. I absolutely love this technique. So if you haven't seen me before, I'd love it if you could subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Thanks everybody, take care, and I'll see you again soon.